In Parshas Yetzira we have the Aseret Dibros, and the first Dibra is Anoch Hashem Lekacho. Anoch Hashem Lekacho was how HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself. The only time that we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed himself to the multitudes, to many, many at once. So he revealed Anoch Hashem Lekacho, I. So for us, the later generations, the big question is, who was that I that revealed himself? What does that mean? What's our relationship with that I, with the ultimate I? And so to protect the I, to protect our ability to identify the proper source, so that we don't, chas v'shalom, make a mistake and serve a false cause, serve something that can cause damage to humanity. So we have the second commandment that says, Lo yeh l'cholim acherim, that you shouldn't have any other gods, you shouldn't serve any other forces, you shouldn't serve any other powers other than Anochi, the original one. So he starts at the Degam Achnefraim by Leisasa lechofesa v'chol tmuna, which is part of the second commandment. Don't make a pesel, meaning some type of a tzura, some type of a form that you're going to associate that form with divinity. You're going to associate that form with something holy, with something worth serving. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to make a pesel. Of v'chol tmuna, you shouldn't have any image at all of what it is you're serving. You shouldn't know that, oh, you know what I should be? I should be X. You can't know that, because you're not qualified to even have that opinion yet. How much do you know about yourself before you arrive at that opinion that I should be X? Maybe there's false assumptions in that. And if you're going to try to be that, you're actually going to cause damage to who you are. So that's what he says. That lesasa lecho fesel, says the Rechaim HaKodesh. Don't make you into a pesel. Don't create a dummy of what you think you should be and then try to force your spirit to become that. Because that's avodah zarah. Then you're changing the order of things. The order of things is your spirit decides what it's going to be, and it uses its imagination to become that. But when you, the imagination, forces upon the spirit what it needs to be, then you're making yourself small, you're putting yourself in a prison. So that's what he says, Leisasa lechof esel. That's what it says, Derechaim. So the Degam says, V'chein mistama v'chol tmuna kur gam ken ratz misadam. So the next one is v'chol tmuna. Don't have any image of yourself. Not a negative image or a positive image, or any image. Because you don't know. You've seen some events, but that doesn't really tell you who it is that's experiencing those events. It doesn't really give definition to the human form. It simply says that it happened to be that as you were created and you came into being, you went through certain events. Okay, so we can identify what happened to you. But what does that mean? What does that tell us about you? Who are you? Nothing. Doesn't tell us anything about who you are. If you would have gone through different events, you would be something completely different. And so the events are not relating to the essence of who you are. The events are relating to what happened to have happened to you. It's a mikre, it's a happenstance. But it doesn't define the essence, it doesn't define the experiencer. So don't think of the experiencer in forms of experiences. That's not who he is. He's the one that's beyond all that. So he says, V'chol tmuna kur gam ken ratz misadam. Don't have any image. Yesh lamer remes b'dei apim adisa b'Zohar HaKodesh. Tzadikai di bedora, the tzadikim of a generation. O zakor di bedora, the people who are the most pure. O chakime di bedora, the most wise. In pnei shchinta mamish, they are the face of the divine presence within the world. When a person sees them, he sees the divine presence within life. And this is why it's so important to understand the Unoichi, because if we identify the Unoichi as an imagined being, as something outside of us, something in outer space or anywhere else, and we serve that, then we're serving a pesel v'chol tmuna. Then we've created an image of God with our imagination. And as we serve that, we can cause a lot of damage to ourselves and to our children and to reality and to the world and to our neshamas. Because our imagination is not qualified to imagine God. And so when we serve, it has to always come back to what are we serving? Because it's not the actions of our serving that will give us a spiritual benefit. It's the intentions of our serving that will give us a spiritual benefit. And the intentions of our serving can also take us into hell. If we serve an imagined God, if we serve the wrong entity within our minds, if we think about it wrongly. Because our brain, our nervous system has already been designed that if we think about it right, it will cause good things to happen. And if we think about it wrong, it will cause discomfort within our system. And so, that's why it brings the Zohar that says, the tzaddikim of the generation, the chachomim of the generation, those who have access to deeper wisdom within a generation, they represent the intelligence that is the divine presence within life. And so that tells us that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Klal Yisrael Anoichi, he's not saying Anoichi from an external point. He didn't show them that up out aware in space there is somebody or something that they need to be aware of. That wasn't the message at Har Sinai. The message was an internal message. The message was that the thing you're interacting with constantly, the thing inside of you that's alive, is not what it seems to be. There's something more to it. And therefore, don't assume that you know what that is. You don't know what that is. You don't understand what that is. The depth that that thing has, the potential that that thing has, you have never seen. You've never experienced. Only people in ancient times had a little taste of what that intelligence is capable of, because they had the freedom and the knowledge and the wisdom to know how to get to that deeper potential of a human being. And so, if you want to find that anoichi, if you want to find that source from where everything emanates, then don't define yourself. The moment you've defined yourself, you've placed yourself in a prison, and your spirit might be very uncomfortable with that definition, unbeknownst to you. And so when we look at the wise of a generation, we see the presence of the highest intelligence within man. Why? Because how they describe reality, how they define what's taking place, will now cause everybody else to have to follow that prescription. To some it might be convenient, to some it might be very inconvenient. But the place where the Torah really is open for interpretation is within the minds of the Gedolei Hador. And once it receives interpretation from those minds, it trickles down further into the masses and what they think and how they react to those realities. What does it mean to them now? But the ultimate definition it received as it was coming in through the leaders. And so therefore the leaders represent the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the people, kaviyachol. The leaders, by defining what it means to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by defining what it means to be good, to be kind, to be proper, they cause other people to see God in a certain light. And therefore they're the face of the Shekhinah. They're the face of what you're interacting with as you try to interact with reality. And this is because the klal, the general population, everybody together, represents the conscious portion of creation, the conscious portion of nature. So what we think is what decides what we're interacting with. We give HaKadosh Baruch Hu clothing, kaviyachol, and then as we dress him up in that, we interact with him with those clothing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is beyond all that. But in order for us to interact with him, we have to dress him up as something. And the closer our interpretation is to his real truth, the more people will enjoy that interaction. The further away it goes, the more it becomes difficult for people to live and to understand the purpose of life, because they've lost access to the real truth. They've lost access to how close they really are to where everything is happening. And so this is how the Torah creates different levels of perceiving the same realities. At the highest level, you're perceiving God as being within the universe, as being the one that gives life to everything. At a lower level, we perceive God as giving light, but the angels are the one within the universe actually creating the reality. At a lower level, we say, no, the angels are causing further development within the psychological structures in order to create how we define reality. And then the last level is when people just see the physical matter and they don't even understand that there's a spiritual process that's animating that physical matter. They're not even thinking about a spiritual process. They're thinking of existence and life and experience simply in terms of matter, simply in terms of quantity, of what's happening externally. What are the senses picking up? And they lose access to the entire internal experience, which is where everything is really taking place. And so that internal experience is the place that has divine potential. That internal experience is the place where we're not allowed to create any image, any limitation, any restriction. Anything that's going to cause a decrease of our spiritual energy. Because only then will we open up to the infinite resources of the one who created us, to the infinite intelligence that's already present within us, that's already running our body through this magnificent system that was designed by the creator of the universe. And so that intelligence is available to us to the extent that we can develop a relationship with it, to the extent that we can understand it appropriately, to the extent that we can understand ourselves and verbalize what is really happening within our system, what is really taking place beneath all the different pursuits that we have externally. And so the leaders define how society is going to interact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is going to interact with the Shekhinah. And so he says, Inim pnei Shechinta mamash. They're mamash, the face of the Shekhinah. They're the face of the manifested presence of how humanity guides its own destiny. In I b'izkasya v'inim b'izgalya. I, the Shekhinah, the intelligence is hidden within. V'inim b'izgalya, and they're the ones that you can look at and see. This is like, it's just like in a human being. There's the head of the human being that's running the rest of the body. So you could say, when we look at the head, we're looking at the place where the Shekhinah resides. That's like it says, where we say in Krishma, Val Roshi Shekhinah scale, that the Shekhinah is on the head because that's what's running the organism. The same way when you look at humanity in general, you look at the leaders, you say the Shekhinah is in the head, the Shekhinah is in the leadership, the Shekhinah is in the Rosh Hadar. That's where the intelligence comes first in order to run the rest of the population. V'chein perish hatargum haposik Yisru Melech bo is Shechinat Malchain Beinein, that the Shekhinah of the king, Yisru Melech, the Melech Malchei Amlochim, bo is within Klal Yisrael. Beinein daike, it's within them. Hainamamish begavein, it means within their bodies. Voisam shayim b'china now, those people are not at this level. Eina b'madragezi, they're not at the level of actually living that intelligence, of being a face of the Shekhinah. V'heim einam rak dmus itmuna v'tzelem elikim. They're just a person who hasn't arrived to really be in touch with his neshama, to really be in touch with his true nature. So he is not really that. He's just a picture. He's like a pesel. He's like a sculpture that represents a potential that hasn't been manifested, that hasn't been yet realized. So in potential, he can be that. He can be the face of the Shekhinah. But right now, he just looks like one. He's an imposture. He's not the real thing. And therefore, he has Shenivre B'Tzelem Edmus Elikim. He's B'Tzelem Elikim. He's in the form of God. He's in the image of God. But he's not there. God is not home. So there's a mashal shnei achim, echad melech ve'echad listim. So the pasuk says, if somebody got hung for whatever reason, then le'sol livnos al eitz, he can't leave his body hanging because kilas elikim toli. It's not a good sign for the king when you see the tzelem elikim, you see the form of God hanging. It shows it's a desecration of the king's covet. So the mashal is that Chazal give us that there's two brothers. One was a king, ve'echad listim, and one was a rabbi. V'nitfas halistim v'nitlu v'tziva melech lik chosim natliya ki mish lo yaseh tulu ha'mek tmias melech tulu v'zayin kavod ha'melech. So the melech had a twin brother, and when the twin brother got himself in trouble and got himself hung, the melech wouldn't allow him to hang because it looked like the people, like the king is hanging. So that's terrible for the name of the king, to have his looking like hanging. So the same thing, when humanity is not the way that it needs to be, it's kivyochel like HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being desecrated, because we represent him. We have kivyochel his face. When we look at a human face, it's like we're interacting with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We take life based on the subtotal of all the different faces that we've seen and what they express to us, until we can find our own face. When we can find our own face, then we can find that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really always nice. It's just the people that dress him up sourly. But until then, when we interact with people, we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's face in their face, because that's the most alive thing that we see. There's nothing as alive that we can look at, which is more alive, which is more sophisticated and speaks more to our brain than a human face. And so when we see that, we see the face of Kaviochel, we see the face of God. That's the Tzelem Elikim, because it gives our mind a complete image of a state of being, of a state of presence. Between all the different features within the face, we see the face, we see like the nefesh, we see the pnim, we see the internal feeling state of the human being that resides within. And that's the highest level of communication we get from nature. There's no higher level of communication we can get, and therefore we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that, because that defines our reality, it defines our experience, it defines what's going to happen to us going forward. And so this, when a person is desecrated, when a human being is shamed or embarrassed, then it's Kaviyachol Kila HaKadosh Baruch Hu's twin is being degraded. It's like we're making fun of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in our minds, that causes us to lose importance, to lose the way that we know how to give more, to realize the preciousness of life, to realize how important it is, the experience that we're having, that each moment, this is part of a divine experience. We're going to be eternally defined by what happened in these few moments between our birth and our death. And so when we look at birth and death to the extent of eternity, it happens very close one to the other. So right now we're in that lucky shot where we're right in the middle of eternity behind us and eternity ahead of us, and we're in the middle of the action. So this is an important time. This is a time where we have to learn how precious life is. And when we see a desecration of a human being, or when we speak down or speak badly of human beings, we lose the ability to have access to the preciousness of life. We lose the ability to know how to value what's taking place. And that causes that we can't afterwards have the same level of experience, that we can't interact with life the way that life deserves to be interacted with. So that's why the mashal is of two brothers, Kaviyachol, and every person is like a brother of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every person represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this world. So it says, by a regular person, the person is B'Tzelem Elikim. He's not the thing itself. He's not the actual Melech. He's not the Pnei HaShechina. But he is a face. He looks like it. He gives the impression of that. So when people see him in that way, it already makes their imagination see Kaviyachol that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is of less value, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not as important as we thought it was. And that's a Chil Hashem. But those people that we spoke about, those who are the Chachomim or the Tzadikim, they are the thing itself. That when a person looks at them, it's not like he's seeing the twin of the king. He is seeing the king. Because this is the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not that he should run the world. The Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that the Shechina should run the world. And the Shechina runs the world from within the world. The Shechina runs the world through the wise people of the generation. So when the people of the generation are wise, and they can connect to the true intelligence of life, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running his world from within the world. And that's the Tachlis. The Dira B'Tachtonim is not so an external entity can live here. It's so that humanity can live here in a way that represents the will of the one who created life. That represents the will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And his intention was that those who live in life should run life. Those who live in life should understand life enough that everything should be under their control. So when a person sees a face of somebody who is not yet at that level, he sees the twin of the Melech. But that's not the Melech himself. But when a person sees a person who is at that level, a person who's already perfected himself, who's already gained access to his spirit, to his neshama, then he's not seeing the twin of the Melech, he's seeing the Melech himself. This is the Melech. And when Adam Rishon was at that level, all the animals bowed down to him. Everybody, the angels, the animals, were all ready to serve the King of the universe. Who was the King of the universe? Adam Rishon. That's our lineage. That's our DNA. That's our seed. We have within our seed a way of being where all the animals will recognize that we're being the way that we should be. We'll have their hechsher for our behavior because they will see that we have managed to live in a way that's not in conflict with the nature around us and ourselves. And when they see that we belong it, that we're in charge. But when we're in conflict with ourselves, they don't see what they're supposed to see. They see tension, they see anger. They see a being that's even less calm than the animal from the jungle in many ways. And so they don't have that respect that they're supposed to have. They see that when they look at man, they don't see the twin of the king. When they look at man, they look at his spirit. Either the king is there or there's nobody there. But the tzaddikim who had access to these levels, so by them, the animals will interact with them differently. Even the animals would see that they're different. Because this is a natural phenomenon. This is how nature created us to be. This is not something that we're going to artificially create, like technology or things that people come up with in order to make life interesting. This is the original intent of the one who created us, that we should be this way. This is why we were created with this sophisticated piece of machinery that we live in, so that we can fully recognize its benefits and realize how it works. And when we do that, then we gain access to being what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to be. And that we cannot do as long as we're imagining ourselves to be something. As long as we're imagining an image, as long as we're telling ourselves, oh, this is what you need to be and then I'll be happy, then we're putting a pesel and a tmuna. We're serving our imagination. We're not serving the one who created us. The one who created us has a much bigger plan for you than anything you can imagine. So don't try to imagine what you're going to be in the future, because if you turn out to be that, then you've punished yourself. Then you've removed yourself from your real you. You've removed yourself from being what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to be. You've removed yourself from the Nochi Hashem Elokecho. I, the infinite I, is the creator of this experience. And we are supposed to be experiencing in accordance with his desire and not with our imagination, not how we think we is. Not because somebody wants to hurt us, but because somebody wants to be so nice to us that we don't fully understand his niceness. We're only going to make it less. We're only going to make it small. We're only going to make it limited if we get involved in what we think it means. So we have to allow him, the ultimate I, the I that's visible within the intelligence of man, the I that can be developed and evolved within us, to ultimately show us who the real us is. Who do we really serve? And what does it really mean to be us? Because when we'll discover that, we'll be zeicha to the Gula Shleima.
You said that, so the wise people of the generation, ultimately what we call the Rosh Hadar, they are supposed to be the ones that we look to see the Shechina, essentially, because the Shechina is the head.
Yes.
What happens if the Gedolei Hador of the generation, as learned as they might be, don't seem to connect to the generation?
So we're in Galus. We can't expect to have the same Gedolim in Galus as we do when we're not in Galus. When we're not in Galus, we know the truth, and then the Gedolim are based on that truth. When we're in Galus, it means that everybody's confused. So not necessarily are the leaders the Gedolim. Sometimes the leaders are just people that other people decided to follow for whatever reason. But it doesn't mean that they're the Gadol. It could be that people are just very confused. And so the Gedolim means that they actually have access to wisdom. And sometimes they might not have a following at all, but they're still the face of the Shekhinah.
So maybe the Lamed Vav Tzadikim.
The Lamed Vav Tzadikim are definitely the face of the Shekhinah. But people who have access to real truth. Now, the masses can follow all kinds of nonsense. That has only to do with the imagination and the excitement that the imagination gets from from mass worship and seeing others and everybody reinforcing their beliefs over and over and over again. And this is how we have so many religions trying to sell similar things but in different languages, and everybody's so certain that only theirs is the right one. This has very much to do with the herd mentality, but the real Gedolim are people who have access to understanding, to real intelligence of life, not simply to followers.
So how do we identify a true Gadol?
I don't know that we can. I don't know that we can. We have to just look for the truth as best we can. And the closer we get to the truth, then what means real to us will be important enough for us to follow, and so that we can find what this is all about. Because otherwise, if we follow others just because we think they're Gadol and it doesn't resonate within our heart, then ultimately we're fooling ourselves. Because it's our heart that needs to be developed. That's our first commandment. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I don't care who else is telling you anything. I created you, which means I have a personal relationship with you that you need to be developed. You need to be the most that you can be. And that's your responsibility as the brain, is to go figure out how do you do that for your heart. How do you develop your heart to become the most it can be? Because then you're going to find God in there. And that's the only God you want to know. That's the God you can die with. All the other gods you have to leave here when you die. Yes.
So you talked about imagination.
Yes.
And bad imagination. Because if
Today the imagination is mostly our enemy.
so tefillah, which at least based on the Rashi in Vaychi,
Yes.
where Yakov tells Yosef, "Nanechi lo pilalti," right?
Right.
Take tefillah to mean that, like going within. I didn't fill myself up, my mind, tefillah. I
Yes.
didn't imagine, right? I've heard it been said that tefillah, ultimately tefillah is that I go within. That
Yes.
I go within and I try to change myself. So, and probably this is a massive question, but in terms of starting, if imagination is changing myself, right, to ultimately, to reach, which is unlimited, you described as unlimited, infinite, what Hashem gives us potential for.
Yes.
But where do I start with my imagination, right?
So two things. The imagination, ultimately what you want to have is the ability to shut him down. Then you know that he's yours. Until he's working, despite of you wanting to rest, then you know that he's working for somebody else. And so the first beginning to be able to have that relationship with your imagination where you can shut it down is to first turn it positive. As long as it's fighting and bickering with all kinds of things happening inside and outside of you, then you're not going to be able to have that relationship where you can quiet it down. So once it becomes positive and it loves humanity, it will also love you. And that gives you a lot of benefits. So training your imagination to love humanity is the first step to being able to calm your imagination.
And to love myself.
And that will ultimately lead you to love yourself, yes.
Okay, so
Because you're also part of humanity.
right. So to clarify that though, like, does it start with loving myself or does it start with loving you?
Whatever you find easier. Keep working on both sides until everything is equal.
You said imagination, but then there's like the Bias Mashiach, Ani Ma'amin, so what are you supposed to think about that?
That you believe that one day humanity will not be held hostage by their imagination.
So when you daven, what are you supposed to think about? Because if you can't imagine,
When you're davening, you're not imagining. You're tuning into your real feelings, your real fears, and your real concerns in life. And that's why davening is given in order and with words, the reality. It brings the imagination on the same page with the spirit.
okay, so practically speaking, just reading the words without any thought is the ideal situation in davening?
No, the heart needs to be involved. The davening is avodah shebelev. So the purpose of using the words is to awaken the heart. So through speaking, this is a little bit like we see to create fire, we take two rocks and we rub them together. So the rocks in the Sefer Yetzira are letters. We take letters and we rub them together until the heart gets some fire. And when the heart has fire, then she starts acting within the spiritual realms. Then she starts changing what's important to her. She starts changing how the mind is going to work. She starts changing what the priorities are. And that's going to eventually cause you to have a different manifestation. It's going to cause you to have a different day. But only if the heart's involved. If there's no emotion, then it's not really tefillah. It's an attempt. But it didn't arrive.
So how do you get the heart to be involved?
By being true, by describing truth. The more you're imagining and you're saying things out of imagination, your heart doesn't really care. But when you're describing a real concern, that's when your heart wakes up. So if you have a real concern about health, your heart's going to be involved in it. If for you it's not real, you haven't noticed where you live and what you're riding in and how necessary it is that it functions, then your heart is not going to be involved. You'll be like, okay, I have to say this, I'll say it. So it's all about making it real, because that's the only time the spiritual is actually changing.
Can I ask a follow-up from Thursday? You said, I think you said, that now the physical used to be a manifestation connected like on par kind of with reality, but they're separate now. Physical manifestations of things is not necessarily like the real essence of what's there. What is the purpose now of like physicality? How is it meant to be used?
Oh,
And beauty,
so-
what's its place?
So since the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the physical has been a problematic state, because whoever is in charge of the Gashmis, whoever is in charge of the leadership of telling us what to do, they decide how we gain access to the physical goods, like food and houses and money and even each other. So when we're in a time of Galus, it means that the leadership is not wise enough to give us a societal norm that's going to give us comfort, that's going to give us the ability to have a pleasurable life. So if we can't have that, wanting it is going to become an enemy for us. And this is where suddenly everything physical became the Yetzer Hara. It wasn't the Yetzer Hara because it's wrong to want physical. It becomes the Yetzer Hara when you can't fulfill it. And when you can't fulfill it and you still want it, that's going to cause anger. That's going to cause friction between us and reality. So as long as we don't have access to the proper leadership and we don't have access to our own freedom and our own ability to create structures that make sense, to create understandings about life that are helpful to humanity, so the less we want, the better off we're going to be. The more spiritually clean, so to speak, we're going to be. But at the same time, our spiritual needs require us access to certain physical things. And so it's a fine balance of understanding when we're doing damage to ourselves by consuming too little, or when we do damage to ourselves by wanting too much. But ultimately, the goal is that we should very much enjoy what we have, and we shouldn't want anything we can't have. Because that's the proper balance, where we can have the most pleasure of the things that are available to us, and have no desire for things that we don't have access to.
Wouldn't turning inward and connecting with reality give us like a power to affect physical things around us and like change or uplift them?
Of course, but what's available to you is what you can use. So the more we become spiritual, the more easily society will be able to find a place where we can all please each other and be happy with that. We can all get to a place where everybody can find fulfillment. And this was what we had in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, that people were very much having a good time also on the physical side of life. Not only waiting for after they passed to have a good time, they were enjoying life while they were living it. But what's that?
You're saying that existence is not accessible now?
It's not accessible because we don't have the people or the lives or the availability of the things that we need. Like, for example, just parnasa. Parnasa alone can take, today, if a person has to interact with the economy, it will take his piece away for the most part. So these things, there might be very subtle influences on our daily lives, but they take away our ability to fully enjoy our existence. They take away our ability to ponder the deeper sides of reality. Because for that we need complete peace. We need to fully embrace that the Creator only had our best interest in mind when He created us. And we can't do that when we're pestered by all kinds of things because we couldn't figure out a better arrangement so that we can be and be calmly. So only when that will be figured out will it be, that's the concept of Shabbos, where that when the time of rest comes, when we're done with the 6 days of work, then we can rest and we can enjoy, and then our pleasure becomes holy. Then the pursuit of being able to live in this life and enjoy this part of life also, that's the ultimate holiness. But now if we're going to do that, we're not only going to destroy our ability to enjoy the future so that our children can have a proper setup, but we ourselves are going to start struggling, trying to come after things that are not easy to come by. Everybody's grabbing for themselves. Nobody's looking to enhance anybody else's experience. And so in such a time, the wisest thing to do is to limit the amount that you need so that you can survive on less and you can find more stimulation and more fulfillment from within.
What do you mean by fulfillment from within?
Fulfillment from within means that through thinking certain subjects, through realizing certain realities, a person could enjoy just being here. The mere fact that he's here tells the brain, tells the mind so many things that if it's open to observing them and it's open to subtle stimulation, it can find a lot of joy simply by the fact that it was created. And that can only happen when a person is quiet enough from external disturbances that he's in a place of peace, that he actually wants to be here first. Many people are not really sure if they made a good deal coming in here. So only when a person finds certainty in that choice and he is grateful, so then the fact that he's breathing is enough of a reward for him. He doesn't need any additional stimulation from the outside to convince him that it's okay to be here. But that's a high level. Today people are very stressed. And one of the first things that stress does is that it makes us lose access to a big part of our nervous system, to the most important part, which runs all our pleasure responses, which runs our ability to enjoy even music and all the subtle things in life we cannot enjoy when we're stressed. And so people have lost today access to the ability to enjoy life. This makes people a lot more irritable, and that causes more people not to be able to enjoy life. So it's just a vicious cycle.
But you did say that we should try to, like, as much pleasure as we have access to,
we should take advantage of what we can so that we have enough will and we have enough energy and calm to be able to interact with life as best we can. So if we get frustrated, for example, so that's a form of pain. So now, in a perfect world, we should have a pleasure to compensate for that pain so that we don't feel angry at life. So if we can live in a place where the subtle things in life give us pleasure, then there's an abundance of pleasure. But if we're running after pleasure externally, everybody wants the same things. And everybody wants more and more and more of it, and more control, and make sure that even tomorrow and next year and 3 years from now we'll still have. So it ends up people just competing against each other and not enhancing each other's existence, not helping each other get to what they want to go. They're just standing in each other's way. And that's when we all have the least.
You mentioned that animals pick up on whether human beings are behaving the way they're supposed to behave. And if human beings behave the way they're supposed to behave, then the animals will respect them and serve them, essentially.
That's Chazal say that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have two questions. One is, animals that live in the jungle don't have any interactions with human beings. So how are they picking up on the way we behave? That's number one. And number two is, can you then take it further? And I'm not comparing non-Jews to animals, God forbid, or human beings to human beings. But
everything, I'll save you the trouble, everything gets influenced by every single individual. Not only a nation and not only all of humanity, but for example, me. The thought that I'm thinking right now affected the entire globe and beyond. It affected all the stars. It affected the planets, their rotation, the song that they're singing, because this is one unity, which means that everything is everything. I'm affected by everything, and everything is affected by me. And so when we think, this becomes a spiritual reality. It's known worldwide. And this is what Chazal said, that a person should always see himself as if the world is chetzia zakeh v'chetzia chayev, and his action is what's going to tilt the difference of where it's going to go, because everything that we do is tilting the world somewhere. So it's not about the world really being at a 50-50. The point is that everything is going to cause the trajectory to go in a certain direction, slightly more here or slightly more there. So obviously when there was just one individual in the world like Adam Rishon, his behavior had a much bigger impact than my behavior, because he was all of humanity in one. So what he thought created life, created what's going to happen for the future. And this is why his action and his chait was so significant, that the entire trajectory of humanity went down a completely different path based on one action that he did. But for all of us, this is still the truth. It's only a matter of degree, of how much of humanity do you represent. But the truth ultimately is that everything that we create exists in us, exists in the world, exists in the consciousness and the collective consciousness of all of humanity, and is going to affect the collective imagination and how it creates life going forward. And so therefore we have to learn the rules. The first rule to make sure you're on is be kind. Because if not, we have no idea how that's going to go through the natural system, the ecosystem of the universe, and how it's going to come back, and who it's going to hurt, and how much. So as long as we're not creating conflict, at least we know that we're not doing intentional damage to the system. Then we need to start becoming wiser. How can you be kind? Maybe what I think is kind is not really kind. And that's where the Torah comes in. How deeply kind can you be? How wise can you be to know what is really kind and what is not kind?
So even our thoughts affects the world, the energy of our thoughts.
Yes.
That's just our action.
Yes, because if you look at creation, you'll see that whoever created this is not intimidated by numbers. If you give him thousands, millions, billions, trillions, he has no problem running all that. And just in our little brain, our spirit is running a few billion neurons. Just so I can say these words, my spirit has to know how to maneuver all those billions of neurons, and it's doing it just fine. So it's running a piano that I can't even imagine, but the intelligence is there to do it, and do it properly, and do it over and over again, and never fail. So numbers don't intimidate him. So to him, the key is, does it exist? Is it real? Or is it not real? If it's real, it goes under his umbrella. If it's imagined, then it's not necessarily him. Imaginations are sometimes at war with him. How many times do we think, oh, I wish this was different, and that was different, and the other was different? And that's us fighting the one that created life. Because he already decided something. It's not like he's leaving it open and asking us. He already decided. Not only did he decide, he created complex systems in order to make sure that everything goes right, and this is how it is now. So when we say, I wish it was different, we're arguing with something that we can't really argue with, and that creates the friction. That creates that our body and our minds start being unavailable to reality. And so these energies are the energies that also cause the animals to become wilder, and they also cause sometimes other nations to want to come and attack us, because we're in that state. We're vulnerable. We're not really good. We're not really kind. We're not authentic with our nature. We're not really being what we're supposed to be. We're sowing within the huge potential of reality. We're sowing bad seeds that eventually can grow into huge trees of badness. And the opposite obviously is true. Ultimately, it's the kind things that grow more, that have a much stronger potential for manifestation. So the more we become aware, the more we can plant within our minds, within our spirits, within the collective spirit, good thoughts, good things, good manifestations, and then ultimately we'll only be surrounded by good. Because if humanity is not creating anything that's not good, then nobody's creating anything that's not good.
So how do you make that decision not go through your mind and go through your heart?
So make your mind, create a habit within your mind that whenever you're making important decisions, you think only about the people, and you don't think about the other objects or items that have already been designated importance by society or by whatever ancient traumas that are within your system. So if you think only about the people and what's best for the people, that's ultimately what your heart would think. So even if your heart's offline, you're still going to make a decision that would be right for your heart. But if we think about other things, if suddenly money is the most important thing in the world and we're willing to override people, our heart wouldn't allow us to do that if it was attached. So therefore, we need to allow our mind to do the work for our heart. To think what's good for the people before we create, even if we don't feel the resistance from our heart. Our heart might be not so sensitive, it might be in a mood, it might be that something happened in the past, why in this scenario it doesn't tell us the truth. But if we're only thinking about the people, which is the only reality, which is the only truth, which is the only thing that God created and cares about, then we're always going to make the right decisions.
Wouldn't I, in a case like that, though, sometimes, if there's the concept of people pleasing,
Right. So one of the people that you have to think about is you. He's also a person.
Right.
So as long as you keep him in the mix, you're not going to overly people please. You just have to do what you think everybody should do, and then we'll have a good world.
So that's the addendum.
Yes.
Right.
Well, it's people. It's all people, not just certain people.
In other words, I'm not just doing it to please somebody else and to be nice, which could be dangerous
Right.
in certain cases, but I have to also think, wait a second. Where does my essence come into the
Exactly.
picture?
So the kindness starts with being kind to yourself. If you're not kind to yourself, then you're going to run out of kindness very fast. And when you run out of kindness, there's going to be something else taking its place. So kindness starts with yourself, and the more you're filled with kindness, the more it will spill over into others. And it'll just come naturally. There will be no effort involved. It will be pleasurable to be kind.